Kenneth Grahame was gay. Ratty and Mo are gay. It's all gay, gay, gay. Hold on there a minute. What if The Wind in the Willows is about something else entirely? Today, this literature nerd is going to discuss author Kenneth Grahame's relationship with his son and how that relationship holds the key to understanding this text. Hey guys, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here to spill the tea on all the classics and their meanings and the people who wrote them. So please like, subscribe, comment, and let's get into this video. In my last video, I discussed the life of Kenneth Grahame and the claim that Professor Peter Hunt has made that Grahame's classic, The Wind in the Willows, is a gay manifesto. And my little slight pushback on that notion. To me, I'm unsure whether it's fair to retroactively out someone or comment on their sexuality. And furthermore, after learning about Grahame's life and diving more into studying this story, I had my own interpretation onto what I think Grahame may have been unconsciously expressing on the page here. Of course, I do have to give the caveat. Professor Peter Hunt is a well-respected academic and one of the leading researchers on this text. I am fully willing to be proven wrong on this. However, I just want to offer my own interpretation. Rather than describing homosexual fantasies, I believe that The Wind in the Willows might be about something more innocent and sadder here. When I found out that the storyline of The Wind in the Willows was inspired by stories that Grahame told his own son Alistair, I looked further into their relationship and into Alistair's life, and I believe that this is actually where the heart of the story lies. So Alistair, the only son of Kenneth Grahame and his wife, Elspeth Thompson, whom they nicknamed Mouse. They nicknamed their little boy Mouse. He was born premature, sickly, and with a genetic condition that made him blind in one eye. He was essentially disabled, and Elspeth, his mother, she couldn't accept anything other than perfect, so her way of dealing with this was to turn a blind eye, so to speak, to any of his issues. Instead, she decided to put her faith in her son's intelligence, and she wrote in her journals about, all the precocious things that Alistair did. Anyone else who would read these things would realize they're just normal childhood milestones, but for her, it was Elspeth's way of making up for what she believed was her own inability to produce a perfect child. When Alistair was a toddler, he was a little terror. His parents were both indulgent. They refused to discipline him or to set boundaries, and they also had this belief that he was better than other children. So when little Alistair would hit and kick other children and pull their hair, his parents unfortunately laughed this off. Oh, isn't he funny? Isn't he cute? And, of course I disagree with this style of parenting, but they're doing it because in their minds, the boy has this inherent flaw in his visual impairment, and so they refuse to acknowledge any other flaw he may have. Grahame began telling his son bedtime stories. He spoke of anthropomorphic creatures who lived on the rural Thames and would go for these boating jaunts together, and they had sort of a gentleman's club. It may all start sounding familiar if you watched last week's episode. And furthermore, he created the character of Toad to represent the naughty behaviors that Alistair was doing, and to, believe that he could influence his son's behavior by writing this allegory about this cocky, wild toad who always broke the rules. Somehow, in Grahame's mind, this storytelling technique was better than real life discipline and leadership. When Alistair was 4, he reached that golden age that Grahame loved so much. And he spent hours with the boy walking in the park and playing with the toy sailboat, reliving his own childhood. And the two of them played like age mates, not like father and son. And it was said that Alistair was so naughty that at one point he received an official ban from the park. And, nevertheless, father and son lived their own golden age together and, enjoyed basking in this moment where Grahame felt the meaning of life truly existed. Until, as the boy grew, his shenanigans were no longer cute and funny. So by the time Alistair was about 6 or 7, it was expected that he should focus more on his schooling, on his studies. And the boy was visually impaired. He was also of frail health, and he had some pretty serious behavioral issues. His parents were not addressing these issues properly, and it showed. He was sent away to school, and you can read some of the letters that Alistair wrote to his father, asking about an update on the Wind and the Willows story, or asking, when am I going to see you? And it's very sad. It's very sad to read. Here we come to the crux of Grahame's life and what I truly believe The Wind and the Willows is about. So going back to his own childhood, Grahame was abandoned by his father essentially from the age of 9. He didn't hear from him anymore. His older brother William died when they were young, and then the uncle who was funding his life refused to send him to Oxford and just told him, get out and make your own way in the world. So he was essentially abandoned or wounded by every male who in his life who was meant to be caring for him. He craved and ached for that positive male role model and for the father-son relationship dynamic that he needed and that I believe all boys need. And when his only son came along, he was only able to fulfill that post to a point. The golden age of Alistair's early childhood was as far as he could get. He couldn't provide the discipline, the structure, and the boundaries that the boy so clearly needed. He couldn't help address his health and behavioral issues and help the boy in this way that he needed. And because he had no example himself, and he was so caught up in his own fantasy world, he just couldn't be the father figure that Alistair needed. All of this was further exacerbated by Grahame's insistence that Alistair attend Oxford himself. The boy was not academically successful like his father, and when he failed his exams at Oxford, his father insisted that he do it again. After several attempts and several failures, the boy failed miserably, and at 19 years old, Alistair wandered out in the night to the train tracks near Oxford. He lay down on the tracks and waited for the train to come. His body was found shortly thereafter. So once again, it's very sad. It's really, really extremely sad. But his parents couldn't accept what happened. It was clearly intentional, a self-inflicted death. But his parents just believed, no, it must have been an accident. My perfect boy wouldn't do something like that. And all of this comes together to give The Wind in the Willows a very different lens. Grahame could never come back down to earth himself. And the worlds he created is where he was able to communicate, where he could dream and fancy, but he couldn't translate any of that to real life. And unfortunately, it all came at the cost of his only son. I'm still on the fence whether I think that Grahame was a closeted homosexual. I don't have enough information, and I do believe, however, that The Wind in the Willows at its core is indeed a story about relationships between men. That's what the author so dearly wanted. Having such a deep father wound himself and being unable to heal it for the next generation, it only makes sense that he would write out his desire for pastoral care, for deep connections between men, and for those carefree jaunts on the river that he loved so much during his own childhood on the west coast of Scotland. The fact that he nicknamed his son Mouse and that the story is about these woodland creatures, I think, is a huge giveaway for the heart of the story. Now, let us remember this lesson as we go about our own lives. Fantasies are important, even necessary, but never let your fantasy get in the way of your lived reality. If you do, you may find that one day you turn the page and your chance to live that fantasy in real life is gone. Instead, ask yourself each day how you may translate that fantasy to reality little by little. It won't happen all at once. Instead, let it flow gently, much like the river where Mole and Ratty lived their days, and where the legacy of Kenneth Grahame and his son Alistair will live forever. I hope you liked this video. Thank you so much for watching. This concludes my little series on The Wind in the Willows and Kenneth Grahame. Tell me what you think. Is it a gay manifesto? Is it just gay propaganda? Or is it, as I said, more of a father wound pastoral care? Or is it just, who cares? Is it something else entirely? Is it a silly story about talking animals? Maybe it's just that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.